And the more we can understand them and have empathy for those users, the better job we'll do as designers at that. So if we can get deeply inside the head of a user, we can use AI to craft experiences that really create a great engagement and also a personalized approach.
Step into the world of success with Your Brand Amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I am thrilled to have one of my USC colleagues on Your Brand Amplified today, Ray Lutzky. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always fun when we get to have conversations, especially the topic we're going to dive into today. We're both very passionate about education, higher education, and AI and the transformations we can make through these artificial intelligence tools, whether it's Gen AI, large language models, other kinds of processes that we have that we know exist. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what prompted your journey into not just being an adjunct professor, but all of the other work that you do, and specifically what you do at Element 451.
Sure. Wow, that's a lot. So, I've worked in higher education for a little over 20 years and kind of fell into it because of things I did as an undergraduate. I was very involved with my fraternity. I was very involved with on-campus student life, and began to explore my interest in actually working in that as a career. I originally thought I wanted to do graphic design. And then after that, I went to grad school at Syracuse and thought I wanted to do public relations. And it didn't take long working at agencies to realize I didn't want to be in an agency. And there's a certain kind of person who likes the agency life, and there's other folks who really don't do well in the agency life. And I was on the other side, even though I worked with some great agencies. And then found my way back to higher education and moved up through student services, student life into admissions, and spent 12 years working in admissions. While I was doing all of this, I also had this interest in pursuing my PhD. I come from a family of scholars and know people who've gone on to become psychologists and things like that, and professors. And so it was always very interesting to me. And truth be told, the reasons we go to grad school are very strange and weird. Like, one of the reasons I wanted to be called doctor is because I've loved Doctor Who since I was about 7 years old. So those are, weird reasons, but I ended up doing that and getting a PhD in communication at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, where I did my undergrad. And then from there, left that admissions office and went on to admission offices in New York City. I worked at NYU, I worked at Pace University, and the last place I worked was Cornell Tech. And I felt like throughout my career, I'd been straddling this sort of STEM fields and communication and marketing part of higher education. And that has been a through line for me in what I've done, both at work and then in the classroom. So I've been an adjunct at NYU in the computer science and engineering department for almost 10 years now, teaching human computer interaction, which came from my PhD. I figured I got this PhD, I should use it for something. I'm not doing user experience design at work, so let me teach about it. And then I was very fortunate when I moved to Los Angeles for my first job in education technology to get to join the faculty at Annenberg. And working at USC has been such a privilege because it's even expanded my skills. I realized when I was teaching at NYU that after a couple of years, your skills get a little stale. I mean, there was no, the first time I went to grad school at Syracuse, there was no Twitter. There was very little social media. So I ended up working at a company in LA. And during the pandemic, they paid for me to get a master's at Arizona State. I'm one of those serial lifetime learners. Yeah. It's like,
same.
Let me learn something. So I did this degree and gained so much more understanding of what I could bring to the classroom that I was lucky enough to bring that to USC in the digital social media and digital media management programs. So still do those things. But fast forward to today, I am vice president for strategic partnerships of a company called Element 451, which is an AI-driven student engagement platform, working with students in admissions and student services at universities like I've always done, but bringing to bear great marketing communications tools, all driven by large language models and artificial intelligence, which has been really exciting at this time and this juncture.
Yeah. Thank you for encapsulating your journey so well. You painted a very vivid picture for us. And I think this is such a pinnacle moment in this world where, I'm talking about Web 4 with a lot of people, which we're not there yet. But people are still trying to learn how to use different Gen AI tools, not even thinking about the larger world of LLMs and artificial intelligence and machine learning and all the other aspects that go into this little bucket called Gen AI. And we see it with our students, trying to get them to use AI tools, right? And use them properly and effectively, not just to write all their papers. I have seen it was funny, one of my students said, oh yeah, one of our professors grades all of our papers through AI. So I tested that and found that the objectivity meant that all of the students would get really bad grades compared to me knowing the students and knowing what I needed to see out of the papers. So I thought that was a funny test, but I think there are a lot of use cases, and people in higher education particularly were trying to test out different ways to utilize this tool that we have access to in the most effective form. So I'm really curious to hear how you're using it. Let's start with the business side, because you're talking about customer journey, perhaps. You're talking about how we talk to students, how we get them into our funnels to then hopefully either apply for a school or speak to somebody and then apply. Is that correct summation?
Very close. Yeah. I mean, so think about the ways a student interacts with a university or a college, and beginning at that initial stage of exploring whether they're an undergraduate, prospective graduate student, exploring their options, wanting to get information, going through an application process, and then being asked to join a class after they're admitted, assuming they're admitted, and maybe even needing to do things once they're a current student. And AI can help now with all of this in very interesting ways that I think connect with folks' understanding of what they can do with AI, but I'm going to give you some examples. So right now, if you were to go to any of the major search engines, you would likely get back a results page that looks very different than the search engine results page looked just 2 years ago. You will get an AI summary at the top of that and not just a bunch of links spat out at you, which is a real innovation. And it's an innovation based on a knowledge base that search engine has acquired, which is massive, and a large language model which understands natural language and is able to communicate contextually those results. Bring that to a university where you can train a knowledge base for an institution to learn everything about that school, from not just what's on the website, but everything that's in the course catalog, everything that's in the advising materials for each graduate program, everything that's in the documentation that faculty have or staff have, things about tuition remission programs, HR. And all of that can be learned very quickly and easily by an artificial intelligence that can then, for example, in a chatbot interface or in a search bar, provide that information contextually. The search bar is just the tip of the iceberg. You have chatbots out there, and we all have had experiences with these chatbots where, you go to your mobile phone provider, you go to your utility company, and you start trying to have a conversation with this chatbot. It can be very limited because it has a limited understanding and a very limited set of answers it's been given. When you use a large language model and a knowledge base to operate one of those things, it can not only become very contextual, but persona driven. Like, for example, you can try this. Go to any college's website and find their chatbot and say, I don't know what to do, or I'm nervous. You'd be shocked the answers you get back to that. Some don't understand the question. Some jump right into things about campus safety and harm to students. When you use an AI to do this, it'll say, it's very natural to be nervous. You're thinking about applying to school. Tell me more about what you might be interested in counseling that student. And then putting them in a place where the admissions team, the enrollment team, is looking at that student saying, okay, how do I encourage them to get the right information, to apply, to make sure they're the right kind of student? And we would use a CRM to do this. People have been using CRMs to do this for 20, 30 years. The thing that was the most laborious to me and to those that worked with me about doing that was crafting all that messaging, taking each individual email, putting it into a workflow, creating a sequence, having that go out. And AI can do all of that now in natural language. I can say, create a 6 communication campaign, 2 text messages, 4 emails, encouraging prospective applicants for the in high school to the BS in biology to apply by the deadline, make the emails sound prestigious, include pictures of the campus, and don't put emoji in the SMS texts. And boom, the whole thing is created. I can look at it. I can edit it. It used the knowledge base to get all of that information correct, and also to put the right branding and messaging in there. not just the images, but like if I wanted to talk about the religious roots of our institution or the historic nature of our campus, that all gets put in there and it automates that workflow. Last piece, I'll just kind of, and we can continue talking about this, but there's so many ways AI can be embedded here. There is an influx of admission applications coming to colleges across the United States. Getting the students to enroll is something separate, but the application review process requires a lot of time and attention. And there'll always be a human element there. I think everyone I speak to on my podcast agrees that there always has to be a human touch in admissions. But we have developed an application reader so that every time an admission counselor is reading an application, it's actually the second read of that application, not the first read, that there's already been a review. And sometimes it eliminates bias. As you just pointed out, faculty can be biased about students when we grade things and say, well, this student should get a better grade, this one shouldn't. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes we make mistakes and we all have biases. And you can actually use AI to eliminate or reduce bias in admissions by putting students on that even playing field through the initial application reader. Those are just some examples of what we're doing at Element 451.
Well, let's talk about the bias issue because we've seen other examples read on LinkedIn or heard in the media, right, of the bias that can be built in depending on the parameters that somebody asks for. So you're applying for a job somewhere and, AI is told it needs to have this much experience and this, and then all of the candidates that come back are white males, not to disparage white males, but, right, no other candidates are presented. So how do you take the bias out when you're looking at students who are applying to college? Because there could be name bias, there could be if something's incorrectly spelled or the grammar syntax is off. There are a lot of human errors also that can be included, right, in these. And so how do you get the AI to not look at those things and to really just look at the merit of each student?
Well, there's kind of two issues I'd like to parse from that. It's a great question that kind of parse out of there. First, this issue of inclusivity and diversity and equity that is being challenged right now in college admissions processes, that even when institutions, after the affirmative action Supreme Court decision, moved to other ways of determining the background, the diversity of applicants, there's been guidance now from the U.S. Department of Education that that is not allowed. And so what do? Well, first of all, we have to be very careful about what we ask an AI to do when it looks at an application. What is the prompt? I mean, the most important thing, if your listeners remember one thing, if they're not using AI or they're using AI a little bit right now, is prompt engineering is the name of the game. Understanding that when you ask a question a certain way, you're going to get a certain kind of answer. My favorite example of prompt engineering gone wrong is from Douglas Adams. And I love science fiction, as I've already kind of geeked out to you about. But The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in that series, there's a wonderful part of it where they build a supercomputer to help them understand everything, the life, the universe, and everything. And they ask the computer, what is the answer to the ultimate question? And the computer says, I don't understand. The answer to life, the universe, and everything. And the computer says, it's going to take me a couple million years to think of this, so come back. The folks come back and say, well, do you have the answer? Yes, I have the answer. What is it? 42. And they go, what is that? Well, that's the answer to the ultimate question. What's the question? I need to think about this now. Come back in a couple million years and I'll have thought of the ultimate question. If we don't get the question right, we don't get the answer we want. So prompting an AI to say, I'm looking for applicants who talk about their experience, in ways that is not just, I have the best test scores, I have the best academic grades, I've clearly had experiences that require a certain level of privilege. We can look at that and say, tell me if you're looking at students that have clearly enjoyed experiences that indicate that there is a lot of privilege to their lives. And you can say in that, I would like you to just kind of pull that out and say, the reasons why these students have perfect test scores is because they probably had months or years of testing coaching versus some of the other applicants who may have come from different backgrounds. We are all human with our own human foibles, and sometimes we put those biases into the prompts we create. And I think part of the problem you're seeing when you do see that kind of inherent bias come through an algorithm or through an AI is it really gets traced back to the humans that are operating that technology. If we want to be very careful to create a level playing field and encourage a diversity of the folks that are recommended to us by an AI for admission, for example, we have to very carefully craft those prompts. And I'm talking about like a prompt, like when you go to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or something, you type in a prompt. How long is that prompt usually? Maybe it's a couple of lines. I work with folks now that they have saved documents of pages that is a prompt that provides context, that provides value, and it all goes into the answer. And the answer is usually more refined when you do that.
That is where projects, thinking about Claude right now, come in handy, right? So instead of just, I sometimes forget to use that though, but if I set up a project and I input lots and lots of data, things that I've written, things that the tone that I want to include, examples of materials that I want it to mirror. When I do that, it's much richer than if I just put in, okay, I'm looking for XYZ, here's 2 or 3 sentences, and either forget to upload a document that has my tone of voice and the way I speak, or, I upload one document versus many. So I love what you're saying here is that we have to really think about it, and we have to think about feeding it from our own experience, perhaps, or our own data or the university's data, right? Versus, I guess that would be the more, for this example, right? The university's data, not just our own personal, but also we have to remember that these tools are taking from every possible, conversation that's been had. And so it's not necessarily going to be pulling out the right things unless we have the right prompt, unless we are very specific.
You're hitting on a really good point. It's interesting because many people use some of the tools we just mentioned. Maybe they only know ChatGPT. Maybe they only know Claude. There's many, many more out there that folks can use. Notebook LM, Perplexity, Dolly. There's so many different tools out there that it's hard to keep up with them. Right. But folks do find personal uses for these. And in fact, Element 451 just completed a survey with NAGAP, the Association for Graduate Enrollment Management, which is the professional association of folks who do graduate admissions and financial aid and all that good stuff. And we asked them, are you using AI? And almost half of them said, yeah, of course I'm using AI. I'm using it for all kinds of things. And I said, okay, great. What kind of training have you had to use it at work? And there's this incredible paradox. Over 80% have had no formal training about how to actually use AI at work, which means we're kind of fumbling around in the dark. We're like, I needed to write my resume, or I explained to me, like a child what, being pre-diabetic means. All the random questions that come to AI explanations, but how do I apply this to my work? And there is the rub. That's why you start seeing these weird things happen when we have important decisions to make with work. And it's not just our personal things that we're working on. It's really important things that affect other people's lives. We have to be really well trained to do that correctly. So what does that mean for the folks doing graduate enrollment management out there? What can folks do? It means more education needs to be done. It isn't just about here, play with this. There has to be a real concerted effort at institutions to help folks adopt this. Not just the faculty. I think faculty are like jumping in feet first here. They're concerned about cheating. There's other things. I'm not to go on a soapbox here, but just to share one more anecdote. I was at the Council of Graduate Schools conference in December, and I was giving a presentation with the provost of a Midwestern state institution who was using AI in lots of interesting ways for student services. And this faculty member got up in the front of the room, humanities faculty member, and as a humanities person, I understand where they were coming from, sort of saying, well, if faculty are using AI to help them write curriculum and assignments, and then the students are using AI to help answer questions in class, what is the point of the faculty? And there was this silence that came over the room. Even there, we have work to do to help faculty understand, as well as staff, what they can be using AI for. Mm-hmm. Because it's just allowing us to focus on the highest priorities. AI is not coming for our jobs yet. It's not. There are different things we're going to have to do. There are things we can spend our time on that we didn't get a chance to spend our time on before. And that's where all this is going, but training is needed.
Yeah. And for those of you who are not in higher education, this applies to every industry. Just had a business problem modeling in AI class last night, and we were talking about this, and everybody in the class has had to look at what AI tools they want to use to solve a business problem that could be solved more effectively. But some of the students in my class, and everybody's working professionals, right? It's even more basic than that. It's, I want my entire team to have access to the licensed version of ChatGPT so that we can use it really effectively in our day-to-day jobs and get the training we need. I mean, the fact that and that they're being questioned by heads of innovation and people who are supposed to be helping shepherd a new technology is insane to me, right? And that's kind of gets to what you're talking about. It's like people are acknowledging, oh yeah, we have these AI tools, but if we don't train people appropriately on how to use them to the fullest extent in the best use cases, they're not a replacement for us at this moment, but they are a tool that we should be utilizing for so many different things that we are probably using wrong a lot of the time.
Absolutely. And look, those companies are doing a disservice to those folks because I know of colleges right now, Pace University, where I worked in Manhattan. Now, every freshman, every first semester student at that course, undergraduate, has to take a course on the application of AI to their work. It's the first thing they're asking those students to do. When those students graduate in 4 years, there have been tremendous changes, or 6 years. We measure graduation rates in 6 years, 4 to 6 years. When they graduate, there's going to be so many tremendous changes that have occurred in the technology, but they're going to be so well equipped to deal with those and leverage those technologies in ways that folks who don't even bone up on using a platform or even try to use it at work are going to have a lot of trouble catching up to them when they come into the marketplace. They're going to rocket past them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to go back to the admissions process because as we're talking, I'm also thinking I'm an educator. I want to have a diverse student body. I love it when we're teaching and our class, all of our classes can share their different lived experiences because they are so varied. But then I also think about my own daughter, who's a junior in high school, goes to a very, very good public high school, has very good grades, right? Taking a lot of AP classes, has known what she wants to do since she was 12. But she does come from a point of privilege, even though, yes, we're Asian, but even that doesn't really count when it comes to a lot of DEI work. But, she doesn't have as many extracurriculars necessarily because we liked her to have the experience of travel. But even if she's probably going to write an essay on how that's helped shape her worldview, but that's going to immediately point out that she has had this privilege. And so how do we, it's a struggle for me as somebody who wants to make sure that we have the ability to look beyond that kind of thing and make sure we're really giving everybody an opportunity, but also thinking about my own daughter's opportunities and what she might not have access to. I mean, we've seen her apply for a summer program and not get accepted because they said, oh, we know that whatever you do, you're going to be fine. You're going to be great. Well, but she still really wanted to go to your school and she really wanted to study that subject for the summer. And now that school's not even on her list because she just feels, really dismayed.
I've been advising students on the process you're describing for almost 2 decades.
Okay.
And
you're hired.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're going through an age-old problem, and it is always a challenge. I mean, one of the things that I advise students to do when they're applying and writing an essay, for example, is to focus on the context and not so much the content. If I had a nickel for every essay I read about a beloved grandparent who passed away and how tragic that was, the essays that make us cry are often the least original, truly. Being passionate about something and letting that sneak through is important, but also recognizing self-awareness. There is a formulaic nature to applying to these schools. And part of that has to do with test scores. Part of that has to do with grades. But also the maturity of the student is important. I mean, think about some of these top tier schools where they'll boast that 65% of the incoming class was in the top 10% of their high school class. Well, guess what, folks? Only 10% of those students can end up in the 10% of that freshman class when they come in. The others are in for a rude awakening, having been in the top tier of a high school and now being in the middle tier of the university they went to. I think being able to demonstrate that level of self-awareness and maturity is very important during the application process. And how can you do that? Well, if a student has had the chance to travel a great deal, for example, recognizing I've been really fortunate to have these opportunities because I have friends who didn't. And in fact, when I visited some of these places, I was able to observe how people live in these communities. It's very different from the way that I live in my community. And it gave me pause about the state of the world and what's going on. And it makes me feel very strongly about X, Y, and Z. There are ways to craft those expansion opportunities for a student's intellect into meaningful contextual points about who they are as a person. If every admission officer could know everything about who a person was, well, I mean, I've been in a situation where a student has been admitted and they've been brought, and then we discover that they have a criminal record, or they've assaulted somebody, or we missed something once this happened to me at a graduate school. We admitted a student, great grades, and we found out in the very first semester they're being very disruptive in class. And I was asked by the faculty, did we know this beforehand? And sure enough, in one of the recommendation letters, one of their professors, an undergraduate, had said, it would be wonderful if this student wasn't such a disruption in class. And it was that one line that we missed. Now, going back to our conversation, AI would have picked that up immediately. We wouldn't have glossed over that recommendation letter and said, this student has a 4.0. They've got great GRE grades. Let's admit them. The AI would have, one of the professors said, this student might have a behavior problem. We should think about that. Would have maybe changed the outcome.
Yeah, that's a really interesting use case. And that is really great advice that you're offering. I was being very selfish in asking that question. but I also think that, if people are listening and you don't just have to, you might have, a lot of people have kids, but also, right, a lot of them can think about how this applies to the world of work. And when you're looking at people's resumes and when you're going through the interview process and the cover letters and what you're pulling out or what you're maybe having AI pull out for you.
It's funny you say that because I have found AI offer me suggestions about how to represent myself professionally that I found insightful. It actually kind of plays into a piece of advice I've given applicants for admission as well. There's a desire by humans to show how good we are with quantity.
Oh, yes.
We have all this stuff we've done. We've had all these experiences. And quality is what really gets through. Quality over quantity is an important concept. I tell students, if you winning the spelling bee in 6th grade is the reason you're applying to the college, include that in the application. If it's not the reason why, don't send me the certificate that said you won the spelling bee, because it becomes one more thing. It's like we ask students to submit something that's 10 pages long. I joke with my students, you could go 9 pages, you can go 11 pages. If you submit 20 pages, I hate you.
Yes.
And that's going to impact your grade because it is too much. So focusing on the best examples, not all examples, is something AI has helped me do when I represent my own self professionally based on the context, the audience, the prompt that I put in. Say, hey, it doesn't matter that you worked at all these schools. What's important is you've worked with technology companies for this audience. So that's what we're going to focus on. And we don't even need to talk about the fact that you worked at these schools. It's less important. And that's sort of like, oh, wow, I guess these things I did in my past that I think are really important and impressive to this audience maybe aren't. So it's a good editing tool. It's like having another person look at your work.
That is 100%. I'm right there with you. The funny thing is I did that part of that process with another person saying, hey, you have all this experience listed, but is this going to help you reach your goals of what you want to do now? And it's like, oh, good point. It doesn't matter if I've been VP of marketing at 2 agencies or this or that or the other. Maybe I just consolidate all of that into, this many years of experience working in this field, doing these kind of items. And then I list the titles and the jobs there, but I don't have them as separate entities, right? Maybe I leave them out altogether because I'm not really working in marketing agencies and don't plan to right at this point. Well, let's talk about the classroom and what you're seeing, because I think there's a struggle. I mean, for instance, I'm getting a master, even though we teach master students, but I'm also getting a master's. I'm getting my MBA specializing in AI ML. There's not a book that we can read for any of our courses. It has to be a practical application. It has to be really philosophical conversations that we have. It has to be lists of tools that we try out and that we actually do test and iterate, and the ideas that we have for how to use these tools more effectively for a business use case. So how important is, getting a degree in social, digital media management in AI? Do you still see the power in a master's because things are moving so fast? And how do we make sure that our students still understand the value? Because I will say, of course, there is the value of the community, the alumni, especially, where we are, USC, very big on that. And that really helps a lot of people get seen by other people and get the right jobs. But
well, look, it is a credential, right? And let's be real. That is part of what's being paid for here. It is a graduate degree is somewhat transactional because you're bringing someone in for something they don't necessarily need, and they're willing to pay for it in most cases out of their pocket, full freight. Whether they do well in that program or not is up to them. But there is this incredible conversation going on right now about the value of a college degree and what it actually means to acquire skills like AI skills. I teach user experience design in a great course in the digital media management program at USC. There is a great Google career certificate out there right now in user experience design that someone could pay much less than the master's degree and go get this training from Google in how to be a user experience designer. And it is very valuable. It is a credential with durable skills attached to it. It is something that companies pay for their employees to go and get because it's cheaper than a master's degree and it takes less time than a master's degree. What's the difference? The difference is, and it will continue to be, the critical thinking that goes into a longer degree program. The length of time that we spend in a degree program isn't necessarily a function of credit hours and academic years. It's a function of time spent thinking about things. Most graduate students enter a program like that with some kind of imposter syndrome, thinking that they're not as good as their peers. They thankfully snuck their way into the program. Thank goodness no one realized that they're not very good at these things. And we've all had students like this that are very concerned that they're not doing well. And it's a maturing process that occurs during that program where they recognize their skills, they recognize what it is that they've learned, and they come to believe that they are who they say they are by the time they're done with that program, hopefully, or at least they're on their way. What does that do? That prepares them for their career because the same thing is going to happen to them in the workplace. They're going to get hired for some job one day. It's going to be a great job. And I had this happen to me. They're going to be sitting there over pizza with a good friend going, I don't know how I got this job. I don't know anything about these things. I don't know what I'm going to do. And they'll remember, wow, you know what? This reminds me of how I felt in graduate school where it took me time and I marinated in it and I thought about it. And so that's where I think the difference is getting those skills, upskilling or reskilling from a short form credential versus this maturing process that involves deep thought, deep reflection. And it allows a learner to move from a position of a lack of confidence to a place of confidence.
yeah, yeah. I love that you just said that because as you're saying, I'm thinking about all these examples of students who I've seen go through that process, whether it's been in, the digital media program, the PR program. So that's a really good reflection for me as a professor too, to remember that. A couple of examples, well, one example specifically, I had a student who really wanted to learn more about a certain topic. So I said, let me introduce you to this friend of mine as an agency. Now she's doing work for him. She's doing a paid internship to learn a skill set that she's not getting at the other work that she does, right? That she really wants to pursue. So it's great because she's getting to see if that's something she really wants to do. It also directly ties into our program. Another student sent an email saying the project they worked on for their capstone, because they work at a major company in advertising, and they were able to meet with the client that they've been doing this project on. And they said they knew the client better than the client knew themselves. And because they came with all these ideas, all this research. And so it was really fantastic for them to be able to go in with that and feel that confidence because they had done the work. And so, yeah, those are pretty cool. Go ahead.
No, I was just, you inspired a thought that we find ourselves often in places where we need to grow. We find ourselves in situations where we have to acquire new skills. Going back to the idea of being a lifetime learner, that's what it's all about. Recognizing that we are always in a constant state of improvement allows us to move past some of the plateaus we put in front of ourselves. If I do this, then I will have this. It's a continuum. I look at what I learned in my undergraduate in electronic media arts. I look at my master's degree. Syracuse is a great school for public relations and mass communications. I had a good experience at my PR master's degree. There are so many things that have changed since 2003 that the value of that degree is not necessarily what I learned about how to write a press release. It's very much more about how I learned to think about a field and how I learned to articulate the value proposition of work being done. Mm-hmm. And then move into the one I did at Arizona State. Great technical skills, Google ads, Facebook ads, learning about all kinds of different pieces of technology. Those too will retire. And what I'll be left with is an understanding of digital audiences and the strategy around digital audiences, not just how to capture attention using ads. So moving forward in this direction, finding opportunities to learn things, bringing that knowledge to what you do, whether it's an internship, whether it's a full-time job, that's what's going to help folks grow. I think that's what we teach in graduate school and undergraduate, is the acquisition of skills that I can sit there and I can do reasonably well by learning things that'll equip me to move forward. And that is not finite.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Going back to the idea of user experience, CRMs, automation, communication, what are some things that anybody who's listening, whether they're in academia or not, should think about adding into their organizations to create that richer, more robust user experience, that personalization that we all want, so that they're attracting and retaining the right clients and customers?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say go to element451.com and look at what we're doing there. I work with some people who are much smarter than me about this, who are developing all kinds of new tools and ideas around what can be done. I will say this, personalization has come a long way. Back when I started using a CRM many years ago, personalization meant you put the first name of the student or whoever you were writing to in the email, and that was personalization, or their name appeared in a graphic somewhere. And that's a cheap parlor trick now, where we can talk deeply about what a student wants and needs. I'll give you an example of a way you could use AI to create a personalized student communication. We work at Element 451 with a number of faith-based institutions, Bible colleges, seminaries. And we, as a kind of an experiment, took a demo version of our platform and said, okay, it's learned everything about this school that we've created, this fake school. What if we asked it to learn the Bible? And we uploaded the Bible and it learned the entire Bible and then said, okay, put this into the character of the communications. In fact, in this sequence of emails asking folks to apply, include a relevant Bible verse in each one. And better than any pastor could, it went and found, and I'm not well versed in it, but it found various Bible verses that connected deeply with the purpose, the call to action of each of those communications. So that personalizes things in a way that isn't just the first name of the student. Is this student has a faith that they find very important, and as a result, by reflecting that to them in the communications, we're demonstrating our values, we're demonstrating what we feel is important, we're demonstrating our character in a way that's personally relevant. So it's just a small example of what you can do with AI. It can learn contextual things that are useful in speaking directly to what that person wants. And that's part of the user experience. User experience is supposed to be about helping real people with their problems and bringing to bear technology and design savvy to help solve those problems. And the more we can understand them and have empathy for those users, the better job we'll do as designers at that. So if we can get deeply inside the head of a user, we can use AI to craft experiences that really create a great engagement and also a personalized approach. We could talk a lot more about that.
Yeah, no, but those were some really great examples right there. And there are a lot of tools beyond the ones we've mentioned. There are a lot of great research tools that can also help you find the right things. I like the fact that you aren't talking about personalization necessarily as one-to-one, but just personalized to the avatar itself.
It's a one-to-many, but it is a one-to-one. It's interesting you say that, because it should feel like that individual student is having a conversation when they're speaking with an AI with an individual. Mm-hmm. And now with AI, we can do that in a way where we couldn't have an individual conversation with 150 students a day or 1,000 students a day. And now with a correctly trained AI with a strong knowledge base behind it, it can have that kind of conversation and also learn as it talks with a student. For example, I was talking about that contextual conversation in an AI assistant. If you go to a well-trained AI assistant or chatbot and say something like, I'm nervous. And it responds, well, it's understandable you're nervous. Tell me more. And the response is not a question either. It's, well, I don't know anybody in my family who's ever been to college. The AI should understand, well, now I'm talking to a first generation student, and how exciting is this for you? And you should be really proud of what you're doing, and talk with them in a way that they feel like they're getting personalized attention and that someone understands them. That is an AI, but hopefully there's a human behind all of that who can then look at that even in a summary and say, oh, wow, this student has had 12 conversations with this AI, summarized those. Okay, in a paragraph, I now understand this is a first generation student, is very proud of what they're doing. They're very nervous about it. They're not sure what they want to study. And they probably need someone to talk with them about the possibilities at this school before they apply. Okay, now I can have a really deep conversation with this person in a way that I probably couldn't have gotten to even if I talked to them for 20 minutes on the phone.
Yeah, beautiful. One more thing I want to talk about is you did mention early on that you have a podcast, and there's a podcast network as well, Enrollify. So I want to hear a little more about that.
Sure. Thank you. I'd love to talk about that. So Element 451, the company that I work for, operates Enrollify, which is the largest higher education podcast network in the United States. And we have a number of shows, some great creators. I have colleagues who host podcasts with many, many more listeners than mine about topics ranging from marketing tactics to leadership lessons to understanding trends in technology and artificial intelligence, particularly in higher education. I run a podcast called Mastering the Next. It is a weekly podcast that comes out on Fridays, and it is interviews with thought leaders in higher education. We try to focus on graduate school and technology, but we have moved into a bunch of other directions, including workforce education, online programs, and those kinds of things. So if folks want to listen to it, they can go to enrollify.org, or they can search for Mastering the Next on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever they get their podcasts.
It looks almost as if you've said this before.
I was practicing before we got started.
I love this. Well, Ray, I'll also have the links in the show notes for anybody who wants to click on them later. This has been a really engaging conversation. I know that this could be part one of a very many-part series talking about all of these different topics and issues. I always ask one last question, though. Do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto, words that keep inspiring you?
Wow. It's difficult to think of one off the top of my head, but one does come to mind. And I'm probably going to butcher the actual pronunciation, but it is a Malay proverb, Malaysian proverb. And I believe it's correctly pronounced. You know what? I don't think I can pronounce. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. I feel like I'm going to embarrass myself. I'll give you the English translation. The English translation is, little by little, a mountain is built. Sikit sikit lama lama jadi bukit. I think I just butchered that, but that's how I think you're supposed to say it. What does that mean? That means over time we grow to become the incredible things that people see and climb. And it takes time for that to happen, and it doesn't happen overnight. So that's kind of the piece of advice that I would leave everyone with is, as you're in a constant state of improvement and a lifetime learner, remember that mountain isn't built in a day.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. I always love having conversations with you, thinking about the next phase of AI, how we can really utilize it for ourselves, our students, our businesses, and our universities. So Ray Lutzky, thank you for joining me on Your Brand Amplified.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. Leave us a rating, review, reach out if you want to be a guest, or if you have questions or there's something that you want to hear about. And with that, I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share their story, their journey, and some tips and tricks for you to think about in your business and your life to make everything a little bit better every day. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.